Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take this air cleaner housing off. I've already taken the bolts out, so there's 3 bolts up in the front and there's 2 in the back. And what this does is this teardrop chrome cover comes off to expose the internal air filter as well as the back mounting hardware of the air cleaner housing. So this just pops off, and then it sits on the ground, or you can put it wherever, rather. Try not to damage it, because if you ever decide to put the stock air cleaner back on, then obviously you're going to want to have that. So if you ever go to sell the bike, you probably want to take your Hypercharger kit with you. So you can got your air cleaner, that just pops off. For those of you that haven't seen it, this is pretty decent. It's pretty clean, obviously, because none of the dirty air gets in there. So the inside is where you're going to see most of your dirt. So this one actually looks pretty good. Doesn't look too bad. Your stock air filter, you can see how much restriction this has, because this little opening right here, this orifice, is where all your air comes in. And it actually comes in right here underneath the tank. So it comes in this tube, into this box, and then back down through the hole, and then it's got to go directly into the carburetor, which is where your rubber grommet is for your carburetor, which is right there. Okay, now that we got the main cover off, you can see exactly where, and I've explained to you the air filter. So there are a couple bolts that hold these on, one of which is here, the other is on this side, and those should be the only 2 that hold it on aside from the actual carburetor. There is a hose clamp right here that holds your rubber grommet on that you're going to need to loosen so that everything will come off of your carburetor. This is not actually physically attached to anything. This mounting bracket right here goes into the back of your air cleaner housing bracket, or your actual mounting piece. So that's all going to come off in one piece. So all this should come off together, as well as all this. Once you take these 2 bolts out on the bottom, loosen that rubber grommet, and then everything pulls off. Be careful, because you do have a couple vacuum lines. Make sure you loosen those, because you definitely don't want to damage these or pull these out in any way, because these are going to be utilized again. Okay. One other thing, and I'll explain to you as we go further on, but that's the one thing you should focus on now. I believe these are probably 8 or 10 millimeter bolts on the bottom, so go ahead and take those off, and then this whole thing should just pop right off. Okay, now that I've removed my 2 8mm bolts on the bottom, I've taken my vacuum line, unhooked, I've disconnected it from my nipple right here, and I've also loosened my grommet hose clamp for my air intake on the carburetor. So what I do is I just kind of, you can twist this if it goes, or just push it, move it out of the way. Just be careful, because these are plastic, they'll scratch really easy. I mean, you're not really going to see it on the top, but I'm kind of OCD. I don't like a lot of stuff to be scratched. So once you loosen the 2 bolts on the 2 bolts on the bottom, something else to take note of down here is this is your idle control knob or valve or cable, and you see this little bracket, it actually slides into that. So you can see that these 2 things actually slide in the middle, just like that, and it just kind of holds it there. So you want to make sure that, and this just pops out, you can just move it out of the way and just leave it hang there. It's not going to affect anything. And you can see the location of that other bolt that I took out there. Like I said, those are 8mm bolts. So once you do that, take your vacuum line off, loosen up your hose clamp, and then this thing just wiggles off and pops right off. And you can see that there's nothing else that connects into the bottom. So you can just kind of move that out of the way. Pretty much the only thing I did to take this off was just my 8mm deep well socket and a screwdriver and stuff like that. So then I'm going to go ahead and move on to taking the carburetor off. Now there are a couple connections here that need to be mindful of. Obviously you've got some cable connections coming in on the front part for your throttle cable, and you got to make sure that those are disconnected or loosened to where you can get in there, and they're on this little wheel in there. I'll explain exactly how to take those off. Got a couple vacuum lines that may need to be taken loose. You also have antifreeze lines that run into this thing to warm the fuel up before it goes inside the cylinders. So make sure that all those are disconnected. You will make a mess, especially if you're just now disconnecting it. My tank's been off for a couple weeks, so there's probably not much fuel in here, as well as the antifreeze is probably already drained out. So you're going to get it all over the place. So plan on washing your bike once you get this done and taken care of. This is the top piece, and I'll explain more when I get the carburetor off, how to drill it in place. Actually, to be honest with you, it may be just a little bit easier to take this off first and drill it. That way the carburetor itself doesn't move, and then the jet itself actually goes in underneath. So it actually goes in underneath on the bottom, so that's another thing that we're going to have to take off and we'll take a look at. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and get started with taking the top of the carburetor off, and I'll take a look and I'll see how difficult it is, and I'll let you know. Okay, so just real quick, this is what I did. I just took a piece of blue painter's tape, and then that's my air jet bleeder, or my bleeder jet. Sorry about the lighting in here, but I had to put it on a piece of contrasting, just a paper towel, so you can see exactly what I'm doing. But I took my jet and I just taped it down to the piece of tape, and then I took my drill bit and I set it beside it, and you can see where the points actually taper down. You want the bottom where those tapers actually start to level out and form the side of the drills to be right even with the top of the drill, with the jet. And then what I'll do is I'll end up rolling this jet off, and then I'll just wrap my blue tape all the way around. That way I know that when I drill into my carburetor, when I get to that lip of that blue tape, I've gone enough, I've gone far enough, and then I know to stop. So I'm not guesstimating. So that's how I did that. And then I'm just going to wrap the blue tape around it and then go from there. Okay, so I went ahead and drilled my hole. It was actually a very easy drill. This metal's pretty soft. It's all aluminum, so it doesn't take much for you to drill. I don't know if you can see down in there, but you can see how it's a little shiny. There's a little bit of a sheen on it, but and you can also notice that the hole's a little bit bigger. So I didn't go all the way deep, just deep enough to where I can seat the air jet in there, because what it does is it runs out to this side right here, and this is all this all operates off a vacuum. So you're going to be pulling off these lines, so obviously you're going to need more of a vacuum, more airflow, and to be honest with you, you're going to have more air coming in, and you've already got more air coming out because of your pipes. So you're going to have a greater vacuum, so you're going to have to take advantage of that. That's why you put that air jet in there. So we need to drill a bigger hole, add another air jet, so you get enough vacuum off this side. Unfortunately, I do have a tap and die set here, but I'm not able to get my wrench on the top of the tap in order to drill that hole. So I got to take the carburetor off, and then I'll go ahead and tap it, and then I'll put my air jet in, and I'll probably jet the bottom of the carburetor too while it's off. Just a couple things. If my memory serves me right, I think I took this cover off, and it's just 2 bolts here and here, and then this half just pops off. And I like to do that because I try not to tear up anything more than what I have to, because you're sticking needle nose back in here because there's a hose clamp you got to take off here, and just the more stuff that you get out of the way, especially some show chrome, the better off you're going to be. Yes, it is a little more time consuming, but then again, I'd rather have this off, safe up on a shelf or on the bench somewhere, to where I know I'm not going to break it, scratch it, do anything to it, because the carburetor, you're never going to see the carburetor. It's going to be hidden behind the Hypercharger. So if you get a scratch or something in it, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But if you scratch your chrome, obviously if you get a screwdriver here or anything here, you're going to see it. So I take the time to take just an Allen wrench, take this and this just pops off. You'll have to pull your plug wire out too, but that's no big deal. So this comes off. There's also a vacuum hose that we can pull off right now, and that just sits right underneath there. So that just kind of, actually this is a breather hose, not a vacuum hose, but you can just leave that sit right there and it's no big deal. Okay, you can see that I've taken my cylinder head cover off. I just set it there on the seat to where it's out of the way. You can see how small the top of the cylinder head is, and just unplug the spark plug wire too. And I've got a vacuum hose or a cylinder breather head, a breather hose right here. Sort of acts as like a PCV valve, but there's no valve in there. But you can see that there's a lot more access here on the side to where you need to get to your hose clamp here, which is your fuel line on the other side. So you may not need to disconnect that. That's probably going to pull all the way through, so you don't have to worry about that. But you do have a sensor back here that's this plug, this connector that needs to be disconnected, and what that's for is that's your throttle body positioning sensor. You also have this T that's going to need to be disconnected right here, and then you've got 2 Phillips head screws back here, and that's your that's where your carburetor gets connected to your intake, and that's where it rises and goes into both cylinders. So you have to disconnect those. You can do just the outside one, I believe. You can just do the one closest to you, and then the carburetor should pop off. Also, you have to disconnect this T. Actually, no. You can pull it on the other side. You can just pull this out, and this is just hooked up to a little diaphragm on the other side. You can pull that out, and your carburetor should pop off. Like I said, up underneath on the back side, there are lines that go to your antifreeze or your coolant. I try not to disconnect as much as I can. I try to leave everything as connected as possible. I don't like to leak a lot of fluids all over the place, so I try to keep as much connected as I can. So definitely evaluate your situation before you start taking a bunch of stuff off. Take a look at what you got and see what the easiest way is going to be. So I think that's going to be the easiest way. Just loosen the inside, or excuse me, the outside, the one closest to you, the Phillips head bolt, and then all the other stuff, you know, you might be able to leave that connected because we already got the hole drilled. We just have to rejet the carburetor, and then we'll go from there. And then everything can go back on. You should have enough slack in your throttle cables to where you can pull this off and you can play with it a little bit. So that should be the only thing, and you can see me moving the carburetor right now. I mean, there's not much on here that holds it other than that Phillips head screw back there. That's pretty much the only thing that holds your carburetor on, as well as all these lines. So once these lines are loose and that nut right there, or excuse me, that screw is loose, this should just fall right off.